Welcome to All Things in the Name of Love. If you like this show, please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks. Today I have with me a beautiful soul, as you can already tell by his energy, if you're tuned in at all, Cory Rosenske. Am I saying that right?
That's pretty close. Close enough. Yep.
Well, I don't like, what is it?
Rosenke.
Rosenke. Okay, perfect. Because everybody mispronounces my last name, so I just want to make sure. I met him recently through a service that I use, Podmatch, and I tuned into his energy. I'm like, oh yeah, I just gotta like. And then I went through his bio again today, and the words that nabbed me and pulled me in were insatiable curiosity. One of my favorite books as a child was The Elephant's Child by Rudyard Kipling,
Mm.
and it's all about this, and it's kind of like, now I read it, I was like, oh, that's kind of violent, but like at the time this little elephant was insatiably curious and he always asked questions,
Mhm.
and that was me, and I always wanted to know why is there separation, and your question was why did humans do what they do. So I wanted to like dive into that, like that really early
Mhm.
knowingness that you had and how that shaped you.
Mhm. Yeah, for me, I would say that I was born that little boy that was asking the question why.
Mm-hmm.
I was raised very poor in British Columbia, Canada. We lived in the mountains. For a while, we were homeless,
Oh,
just
wow.
camping beside different lakes, living in tents, and
Wow.
um, so I didn't grow up like a lot of people in my generation with holidays to Disneyland and video game consoles and
Mhm.
organized sports and things like that. Those weren't available to me. So what I did was I wandered the mountainside with my dog and with my book, and I I looked at the world through the lens of someone wondering why. Not a why as in like, oh, why me? Like not a grievous why, but a
Right.
why that's just why is my family different than other families?
Mhm.
Why is it that the other kids who have so much that I don't have, they aren't happier than I am?
Mhm.
Why do my parents make the decisions they make? I remember very specifically actually sitting with my dad during the first Iraq war. I can't remember what it was called now, Desert Storm or some such thing.
Mhm.
Um, Sitting around the radio and they were broadcasting what was happening. We didn't
Mhm.
have a television, so we were just listening over the radio.
Yeah.
And I remember for night after night, Dad and I would sit late into the dark, listening to the radio.
Mhm.
And again, just that curiosity rising. Why? What's happening? And why is it happening? Right. And I often say, if I kind of give you the short version of a long story, I often say that that why, that question of why really first led me to philosophy.
Mhm.
And from a very young age, I was big time into the philosophers and Aristotle and Plato and Confucius and Marcus Aurelius, who is one of my favorites, far underrated as a philosopher as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
Um, but I quickly learned you don't find the why in in um in that type of endeavor, right? In philosophy, you find, in fact, I would almost say that the purpose of philosophy is to ask the question why, to stimulate more thinking, as opposed to giving us answers. Of
Mhm.
course, there's some nuance there. Ultimately, philosophy led me to psychology, just wanting to, again, wanting to understand people and thinking that I could understand people through psychology. And I think psychology is fantastic. I love psychology, but again, you quickly realize it doesn't answer the question of why.
Mhm.
I mean, for a while there, I was really into Freud, right? When you think of Freud, you think of his whole concept about the development of personality and the id and the ego and the superego and all these crazy things that Freud
Right.
had to say. Um, but again, you don't find the why in philosophy, and I think that's important for us to realize because I think a lot of people on Earth right now are looking for the why there.
Right.
Um, and then that led me to neuroscience. And again, what a fascinating study and what a beneficial study to understand, from a biological, organic way, the incredible impact of neuroplasticity, right? How our brain can literally change shape, through trauma or through self-discipline or,
Mhm.
both the positive and the negative sense.
Right.
Brain chemicals,
Mhm.
dopamine, serotonin, how they affect us.
Yeah.
But again, we don't find the answer to the question of why. To me, when in my journey, when I looked at philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, what I realized was these are the study of mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense where imagine if you're looking at a car, you'd never seen a car before in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and it just appeared in front of you. Philosophy would be like inspecting the curve of the hood or the curvature of the doors and the mirrors, and psychology would be looking at the tie rod ends and the drivetrain and how things move, and neuroscience would be looking at the electrical system, right, and all those finer connecting points.
Mm-hmm.
However, at the end of the day, that car, no matter how beautiful it is, sits there and does nothing except for the driver.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so to me, when we're looking again at philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, we're studying mechanism, we're studying the car. But if
Mm-hmm.
we really want to understand the magic of that car, we need to understand the driver, what and who is in the driver's seat. Because
Mm-hmm.
without that person in the driver's seat, you can't go forward or back, you can't go left or right.
Right.
And I believe that so many of us are looking for answers in the mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
And we unfortunately we don't find it there, which has left us with a great deal of angst. And when we look at our culture and our society today, we see a lot of angst.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One of the gifts that I have been shown repeatedly in my life, especially over the past year, is if I go outside and I'm like, okay, well, what if, projecting in the future, because I've had the gift of vision for many, many years, my inner self says, what do you need in this moment? And I'm like, nothing. Like, then why are you looking outside? Damn it. But I'm curious because it's a curiosity.
Yeah.
And that innate curiosity of like, for me, it was like when I was little, I had an experience where I walked into a flock of Canadian geese and they surrounded me and they were like essentially talking to me, like not with language, but like energetically. And my parents are standing outside the circle and they're guarding me from my parents.
Mhm.
And I'm like, these are my friends, right? They're my friend. Like, I don't care
Mhm.
what they look like. They're my friends. And my parents like finally get me out and like, don't ever do that again. I'm like, but they're my friends. Like, why would I pull myself away from beings that love me and see me
Mhm.
for who I am? And so my quest, I got a PhD in cultural studies trying to understand why there's separation and how separation is created. Well, you can only take that so far. Same thing with philosophy. You can only take it so far. And then you have to go within
Yeah.
to find that the separation is the self from the
Yeah.
self.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's so interesting to like see the different angles of self-discovery that ultimately like there's once I reconnected with my heart, it was the anxiety went away.
Yeah. Well, I think you just used the magic word there too, I think, which is self-discovery. It's an adventure that very few of us travel very far on. And yet if we are truly going to find peace and happiness, it's a journey we have to make.
Yeah.
So, as I mentioned, I didn't find the why in philosophy or psychology or neuroscience. What you have to move deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I believe we have, if we truly want to find the answers of, our deepest questions, we have to look at the soul. We have to look at the core of who we are. And honestly, I believe we live in a world today that has forgotten what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
And it's as silly as that sounds. Our whole culture, and I think most of your listeners would be able to relate to this. Um, our family lives, even, it revolves around catering to the cravings of the body and the brain. And because of that, we come to think that all we are is bodies and brains,
Right.
right? When the core of who we are is spiritual. I always say we're three-part beings, body, mind, and the soul. But all of our cultural energy is being spent towards catering to the biological, to the brain and the body.
Right.
And meanwhile, our souls are starving to death.
I had an experience this summer where I was up at Orcas Island and I found a spot where I could watch the sunset on the ocean for 2 hours a day. I reset everything in me to the point where like I don't like if I'm not outside every single day, and I've always loved the outside, but like that being able to just like be present to the sun setting with the ocean with nothing going on it was like, oh, this is why I'm alive.
Yeah.
You know, it has nothing to do with the doing or the external. It's like what really pulls me in, and it's the interconnectedness with everything
Mhm.
that we've
Yeah.
forgotten. Like trees talk to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and I think you like you mentioned, you should feel blessed because what I desire for people is to be able to get to that point where they realize that that's what they need. But
yeah,
more often, what happens in society is we've traded in true peace and happiness for entertainment
right.
and for a dopamine rush. And for a lot of people, when they get into that quiet place of realizing all these biological, things around me aren't giving me the fulfillment that the commercial told me they would give me, that the school, my professor told me they would give me,
Uh,
that my government told me they would give me, right?
mhm,
Um, but rather than pushing into what you did, okay, well, where is it then? How can I calm myself? How
mhm,
can I actually look for the answer? We just watch a Netflix series,
yeah.
right? We just turn on the music. We traded peace and happiness for entertainment, and it's not a good trade-off.
No, it's
I
not.
often think of it this way, Sophia. We live in a time. This is it's an amazing thought to me. We live in a time of unprecedented prosperity.
Mhm,
I mean, and by that I mean never before in the history of mankind has a generation like the generations alive today been granted such unfettered access to wealth opportunities, to education, to entertainment, to leisure, to comfort, to freedoms, to world travel. We have more than any other generation in the history of the world, and yet virtually every study shows that we're more unhappy than ever.
right.
And we think, how is it that we've accumulated all of this stuff, and yet we still find ourselves discontent? And I think the reason is because there's been I don't want to call it a lie, but a misconception that has been propagated throughout time for thousands of years, perhaps even, that says if you just get to the top of that educational mountain, you'll have peace, right? Or
Right.
if you get to the top of that sexual mountain, you'll have peace, or that
Mhm,
academic mountain, or whatever the social mountain, whatever the mountain is. And ours is the generation who has reached the summit, and we've discovered there's nothing there.
right.
And so our culture is filled with depression,
Mhm.
anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
Despite being more educated than we've ever been, it's filled with confusion.
Oh, yeah.
And I would even say below the surface, most of us can sense a building rage. Like I mentioned, there is an angst, there is a rage that is taking place. And this, despite the fact that we are the most prosperous generation in the history of mankind.
Well,
And ultimately,
it's based on illusion.
yeah, yeah. Well, ultimately, I believe it's because we've been catering to the cravings of the body and the brain,
Mhm,
but our souls are starving to death because we've forgotten who we are.
right. Right. This is so true because I remember when I graduate in 2006, I get my PhD. I'm like, yes. Well, it's the whole ego thing, like gained
Yeah,
100 pounds my last year because I was like forcing myself to do it. And then nothing, crickets. I couldn't get a job for love or money. I ended up working at LL Bean picking orders for Christmas for 3 months, which helped me lose 70 pounds. But like that was the best I could do.
mhm.
Like, so I spent 14 years in college under the illusion that I'd
Yeah,
finish and something magical would happen.
yeah,
And the only thing magical that happened was saw through the illusion that that would make me happy. And I'm grateful for that because I saw through the illusion of it. And I've since seen all the
yeah,
programs and certifications as like part of that illusion. But like it didn't make me happy. The day after I defended my dissertation, I kayaked for 3 hours because my body so needed to be outside. That was a clue, right? That was a
yeah,
clue. Like you spend all this time in academia, and what brings you joy? Being out on water,
yeah,
being outside. Like I got sunburned and everything, and I didn't care because I was like, this is what my soul needs,
yeah,
not the stuff,
yeah,
not the titles, not the whatevers. That doesn't make any sense.
yeah,
What matters is what brings this beingness joy.
yeah.
And
Absolutely. And that's why I'm on such a mission, Sophia, to remind people that more than a brain or a body, you are a soul.
Yeah.
But then not to leave it there, because
Mhm.
I think oftentimes when we use the phrase soul, we use it too ambiguously.
Mhm.
Um, Oftentimes I will use the phrase, instead of soul, I will say our non-biological selves. That is that part of us that exists beyond biology. And it is the core part of who we
Yeah.
are. It is
Yep.
the seat of our personality. It is the seat of our deepest ambitions and desires. And if we're going to find peace, as you mentioned, we're going to find it in the soul.
Yeah.
And so my whole mission has been, first off, to try to convince people once again that, number one, you have a soul. Number two, your soul isn't some like mute passenger that's just,
Mhm.
connected to the flesh right now and
Right.
doesn't become activated till you die. I think a
Mhm.
lot of us live that way. Your
Mhm.
soul is the core of who you are at this very moment.
Right.
And your soul is looking for, just like your body, just like your brain, it's craving something. And it is those cravings that are propelling each one of us through life and time.
Mhm.
It transcends gender, generation. It transcends ethnicity or country of origin, education. We are all souls,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
In search of satisfaction.
Right.
And so my one of my goals has been to try to bring definition to these terms too,
Mhm.
so that,
That.
because when we have definition, we can finally know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. I've written a book called The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the Five Cravings of Your Soul. And
Mhm.
the desire is to try to help people understand, really, at the end of the day, this is what you're looking for,
I
right?
love that. I love that.
Because ultimately, think of it, we live in a world like the soul, ambiguous term, right?
Mhm.
Peace. Oftentimes, it's an ambiguous term.
It
And
is.
to a certain degree, we think that we define each individually what peace is. I don't believe that's the case. When you look throughout history and time, I believe that peace has five core prerequisites, and they happen to be the cravings of the soul. Happiness, again, we self-define it oftentimes. I don't think we can do that. I think it's more helpful to understand happiness requires five core prerequisites, and they
Mhm.
happen to be the cravings of the soul. And so my intent is trying to be to help people, regardless of who they are and where they are, right?
Yeah.
Some of us are people of faith. Some of us are people of organized religion. Others are people of a little bit less organized sense. Others of us um, aren't even thinking in the spiritual at all, right?
Mhm.
But regardless of where you are in your journey, my interest isn't to try to pull people to one perspective of it or another. What I want to do is help people realize, at the end of the day, you are a soul. This is what you're looking for. And
Mhm.
now that you know what you're looking for, you have a chance of finding it. Because as long as it's ambiguous, it's like grasping around in the dark,
Right.
right?
Right. And like
You need to know what it is.
it's a set of tools from what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's a set of tools to help you navigate into yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I've long since given up on writing a bio because for me, it's like this morning, as an example, I bake sourdough bread. That brings me joy. Is that who I am? No, it's a gift that my soul loves to have. Like, it's just a gift. I love baking in small increments. And so that's an expression of my soul. I love being with animals.
Mhm.
Brings me so much joy. And that's another aspect of me. It's not
Mhm.
like I can't define me because me is bigger than any one aspect of me. It's the sum total of all those aspects that I know and that I don't know yet. And that's the joy for me, is to shift that understanding of trying to fit myself in categories to define myself for other beings when I'm just this expression of me coming through in a given moment for different aspects.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think the reason that understanding yourself in this way, in this case, the five cravings of the soul, it really helps because it helps you explore, as an
Mhm.
example, why it is that you're drawn to animals, right? Why it is you're drawn to what kind of bread did you say?
Sourdough.
Sourdough, yeah, which is my favorite bread for toast. Um,
I do.
and so and so for me, I'll just go over them quickly, just so your listeners have an idea on what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Because again, I'm about definition, and I don't want to leave people ambiguous. And of course, in the book, I go into great detail, but I'll just kind
yeah.
of punch through them. uh, the first one, and these aren't in order of like ranking or importance. That's just the way they're all equally large in our lives. The first one is security.
Mhm.
Every human being on earth is looking for security. And when I say security, I mean it basically on two levels: physical security,
Mhm.
which is what we would call our survival instinct,
Mhm.
and relational security. That is to say, we all need to know that our hearts are safe in the hands of those who hold them.
Mhm.
And I've often heard people say that your survival instinct is the most powerful of all instincts. And I would argue that largely because there are a whole lot of us that would willingly risk our physical security in order to strengthen our relational security with someone.
Mhm.
And that's not a psychological craving. It's deeper.
Yeah.
It's in the soul. And and all of us, we may pursue security in different places. I'll oftentimes share the story of, just let's say that there's um Sam. Sam grew up in a volatile home, and he developed a coping mechanism to find security in being invisible. He
Mhm.
never steps forward to take leadership. He's the guy that always wants to stay in the background, stay out of the limelight, because that's where he feels safe,
Mhm.
right? Meanwhile, Juliet, who also grew up in an unstable home, has to take control, has to be the boss, has to control everything around her. Again, why? Because that's how she's trying to feel safe.
Mhm.
Right. And they both chose completely different methods of pursuit, but they're both pursuing security.
Right,
Right.
right.
And then secondly is identity. And I always say identity asks four symbiotic questions: who am I? Why am I? Do I have value? Do I have purpose? And again, you can have all the security in the world, but if you don't know who you are, you won't have peace.
Mhm.
It's a
Mhm.
prerequisite. And again, this is not a psychological craving. It's deeper. It's in the soul.
Right.
In fact, the craving for identity makes no sense from a biological viewpoint, right? And yet none of us can escape it. We
Mhm.
all have to have a sense of who we are. Security, identity, independence. And I break independence down again into two parts. There's the freedom aspect, right?
Mhm.
Right? Like William Wallace, the demand for free. You may take our lives, but you will never take our freedom,
Mhm.
aspect. We need to feel that we are in some way autonomous. And
Yes.
that's why prison is a punishment in and of itself,
Mhm.
right? Just being confined, having that freedom taken away is a
Mhm.
punishment to our soul, in
Right,
that sense.
right.
We are craving independence, but it's not just freedom, it's also the craving for individuality.
Mhm.
And that is I need to know that I'm distinct, right?
Mhm.
And we may want to connect for security reasons or even identity reasons, but at the same time, at some point, we're gonna have to know we're distinct, and we need people to understand that. Even those identical twins that love wearing the same sweaters, right, or they love getting the same haircuts, at some point, they all come to a place where they have to have something that sets them apart as distinct. Otherwise, we feel redundant, we feel unseen, unuseful.
Mhm.
Security, identity, independence, significance.
Mhm.
We all need to feel like we are special in some way.
Mhm.
Not just distinct, but special, right? And for some people, um, Usain Bolt, right now, he's the fastest man who's ever run the 100-meter dash. The day is probably going to come someday where someone beats that, and he's going to have an identity crisis, number one,
Right,
and
right.
a significance crisis, number two, if
Mhm.
he doesn't find a better place to find significance.
Right.
For someone else, it's just they feel like I make the best sourdough bread,
Mhm.
right? And it's something that makes them feel special. We have to have that. And
Right.
number five, innocence. We
Mhm.
are all craving innocence.
Mhm.
And not just innocence doesn't just say I'm not guilty, but it says I am good, even I am righteous. And
Mm.
just think of this, Sophia. Basically, almost every argument you've ever had or any offense you've ever taken happened because you felt that someone, subtly or not so subtly, was accusing you of wrongdoing or wrong thinking.
Mm.
And they triggered that innocence button in you.
Mhm.
And we have basically two main choices when that happens. We either have to run away because we can't be around someone who makes us feel guilty.
Right. I don't know what happened.
Sorry.
I was like, "Oh, now you're gone."
Right. Yeah, you just froze there for a moment when I was talking about significance. And so it
Yeah.
was,
So let's
yeah,
let's let's go through that again because that's important.
sure.
Oh,
I mean,
actually,
sorry,
we were on
it was
innocence.
innocence, innocence.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was saying that basically every argument you've ever had or any offense you've ever taken
Mhm,
happened because you felt that someone was subtly or not so subtly accusing you of wrongdoing or
mhm,
wrong thinking, and that they triggered that innocence nerve in your soul. And you
mhm,
have two choices at that point in time. We're either going to run away and flee because we can't be around
mhm,
someone who makes us feel guilty,
mhm,
or we fight. And generally the way we fight is we accuse them of greater wrongdoing. Because we
mm.
don't have to feel completely innocent, or I don't have to feel completely innocent. I just need to feel more innocent than you are. Right.
Okay,
And so you say, "Hey, Cory, you left your socks on the floor." And I'm like, "Oh yeah?" Right. Well, you left all the dishes on the counter yesterday. Right.
right.
And the righteousness wars begin.
Mm,
And when we look at the world around us and what they call cancel culture, I think a lot of it has to do with this craving for innocence.
yeah,
This craving, because the flip side of the craving for innocence is the craving um, for righteousness, to feel like we are good, we are right. And so we have these cravings: security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence. I believe those are the five cravings of the soul. These are not psychological cravings, they are deeper. This is what your soul is looking for. And they are what we are looking for in love,
mhm,
security, identity, independence. We want to have that connection, but not so much that it infringes on independence,
mhm,
security, I mean, significance, and innocence.
yeah,
They're what could drive us towards relationship or marriage,
mhm,
hoping to discover them there. They're what drive us away because we
right,
didn't discover them there.
right.
They're what make us decide, I'm going to get that PhD or that doctorate or whatever it is, right? And they're what make us realize, oh my goodness, I thought happiness was going to be found when I hung this diploma on my wall and I didn't find it.
Right. Oh
It's
yeah.
it's the same thing. Think of this. I saw an interview with Elon Musk a few months ago,
Mhm,
the richest man who ever existed, as far as we know.
mhm,
And the interviewer asked him, "Are you happy?" Simple question to the richest man on earth.
mhm,
There's nothing he can't have
right.
when it comes to things on earth. And he was paused for a moment in his Elon type way.
Yeah.
Um, and then he said, "I don't think many people would want to be me." And you think,
Ooh,
wow, because I've always thought if
that's a
I
little
could just get a little bit more money, if I
mhm,
could just get a little bit more respect, a little more fame, a little more sex, a little more whatever it would be,
right, right.
I would be happy. It's like, no, no,
Yeah.
you won't. And the reason why you won't is because you cannot satisfy a non-biological craving with biological things.
Mhm.
In order to satisfy a non-biological craving, it has to be satisfied with non-biological things.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
because we've forgotten what it means to be human, we have completely disconnected ourselves from non-biological things.
Mhm, mhm. Although I know for a fact that when I reconnect with all that is, like especially in nature, I have this sense of more than me. Like
Yeah,
it's a deep, deep
yeah,
level of awareness that I lose the biological self in a sense. I mean,
yeah,
I'm still in my body, but
yeah,
like it harkens to the deeper sense of self
yeah,
when I go, and especially for me, when I go into nature and I'm present with nature, and the gift I have, especially with cedars, um, where they like I'll hear them ask me to communicate with them in a non-verbal
mhm,
language,
mhm,
and then I know whatever exchange is happening is for both of us, and that makes me remember that I'm not just my body. There's something greater in
yeah,
me that loves that interconnectivity with the non I mean, since everything's energy and everything's interconnected,
right,
that reminds me of that, and that brings me great deep peace in my soul.
yeah,
And it reminds me my understanding of innocence is with it was like I have not lost my innate innocence within myself.
mm,
Um, I have guarded it fiercely,
mhm,
because that's what lights me up. That's what helps me remember who I am.
mm,
Because it's the joy
mhm,
of my little girl whenever I see turkey as my voice raises 4 octaves because I get so excited about it.
mhm,
That tells me that that part of me, that part of my soul, that deeper sense of the me that I am pulls me into those directions more and more, because that's where I find the deep levels of peace that my soul craves.
Right. No, I hear you, and what I think I hear you saying, um, is that like when you mentioned you love animals.
Mhm,
Again, it's not that a biological animal then somehow satisfies and bring you peace, but coming into connection with these other creatures and other animals awakens you
mhm,
that there is more than you than who just what you are. There's something bigger. There's
mhm.
something mysterious. There's something awesome that we all have that privilege of being connected with.
Yeah.
And it can't, and that feeling cannot be replaced by a bigger balance in your bank account, right?
Mhm.
Or by a smaller number on the weigh scale. You
Right.
know, it cannot be, you can't trade it for anything else.
No, no, I
Yeah.
mean, I love my body. I take care of my body
Yeah.
because it is the vessel through which
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
express myself, and I know the difference.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I can take care of myself. I can adorn myself with whatever I want. At the end of the day, though, I'll give an example, having a cat sit on my lap for an hour, just being present with me while I'm reading a book, phew, man, that
Yeah.
makes me happy,
Right.
because I'm being present with that being who's exchanging energy with me and feeling
Mm.
that heart connection with that
Yeah.
being.
Yeah.
That's what brings me joy.
Right. Yeah. It brings you a sense of there's a sense of security to it. There's a
Mhm,
sense of connected identity.
mhm.
It's called ideum in psychological circles, a connected identity between you know, two
Yeah.
parts or greater parts. Um, absolutely. There are times when you can feel like special, you
Mhm.
know, that
Oh, yeah.
this creature loves me. And then of course, your cat or your dog or your horse um, never tries to make you feel guilty,
Right,
right? And
right.
so oftentimes, I believe that that's why there is the draw to animals is oftentimes strong because oftentimes we can feel um, these cravings of our soul to a certain degree. I think that ultimately because you're human and I'm human, there's no greater connection than the connection that we could have if it was a healthy connection,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
But the truth of the matter is we live in a world of unhealthy connections for the most part, right?
Right.
And that's ultimately what I mean. Even when we think of the concept of good and evil, I think that we can see that in the cravings of the soul. Like
Mhm,
the cravings of the soul aren't good and bad in and of themselves, but how we choose to pursue them
mhm.
is what makes them so. You know,
Yeah.
a good person reaches out. It doesn't just try to hoard it, but reaches out and tries to extend security and identity and independence and significance to you,
Mhm,
right? Whereas an evil person or a person we don't want to be around just sucks you dry and takes it
mhm.
because of their own ego, their own insecurity, their
Right.
own misguided attempts to have their soul satisfied. They take security away from you, and identity away from you, and innocence away, and significance away. They got to make you feel small in order to make them feel big.
Right.
But I don't just say that in a derogatory term, because what happens is when we understand that jerk, or that politician we don't like, or that boss that we constantly find, to be someone we don't want to be around, their souls looking for identity, significance, and innocence, right? And all the five cravings, and they're
Right.
looking for it in the wrong way.
Right.
But at least I know what they're looking. They make sense to me,
Mhm, mhm.
right? And because they now make sense to me, and I'm not just labeling them a narcissist or a sociopath or whatever words that we kind of throw out to label someone, which oftentimes we do to elevate ourselves, which is
Right.
very human. We've all been there. But now that I understand them, I actually have a chance to be compassionate. I
Mhm,
actually have a chance to love them. I actually have a chance to perhaps even be helpful
mhm.
because I know that that boss um who reams me
Wonder
out
what that
because
was.
I didn't hear it,
Oh,
right? That boss who seems grumpy and reaming people out, that's somewhere in there his soul isn't finding what it's looking for,
mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And that gives me the opportunity to have compassion because I now understand him.
Yep. I completely agree with that, because I've encountered many, many people, um, without awarenesses, and just, different points in my life where I'm like, wow, that person's such a jerk. But like when I bring the lens of compassion in, it's like, wow, they had different levels of awareness and were projecting their insecurities out on other people. And I have more compassion for that
Yeah.
because they didn't even have the awareness that they were working from that framework of just that distorted uh,
Mhm.
craving.
Yeah. 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 And so, and that's the interesting part, Sophia, because let me throw something else at you now. So we say, okay, human behavior can be understood by understanding the cravings of the soul:
Hmm.
security, identity, independence, significance, and innocence.
Hmm.
That's why my sister won't talk to me. Somehow, when she talks to me, one of these things is triggered. And it may or not be my fault, but
Right.
somehow or other, one of these things is triggered. That's why my neighbor left their spouse. Again, I don't know, I don't have to know all the intricate details of their life, but I can tell you it has something to do with security, identity, independence, significance, or innocence, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, that's why people join gangs,
Hmm.
right? That's why we do everything that we do. But then there's a sixth element
Okay.
that we can throw into the mix that I think that if we're going to be truly understand human behavior, and not just for understanding's sake, but for the sake of love and connection and the ability to work together, we have to acknowledge this next element. In 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 faith circles they call it sin. In psychological circles we call it the fatal fantastic element. And that is to say, there is, and it's indisputable throughout time,
Hmm.
there is within all humanity a corrupting force that seeks to derail,
Okay.
and that it exists within each. If you give humans something beautiful, we will find a way to destroy it. It's a sad reality that is throughout time, right? And so what we have is we have these five cravings that, when pointed in the right direction, are beautiful. They are the source of peace and happiness. But then there's this fatal fantastic element lurking around with each one of us that we need to figure out how to manage.
Right.
And the success with which we manage it will determine whether we are safe people or unsafe people, whether we are healthy people or unhealthy people,
Hmm.
whether we're people who own our stuff or people who kind of bask in a victim mentality, or whatever it is, right? And so we have to understand that the reason why we can't just say, oh, now that I know that I have these five cravings, I'm going to be happy, right? Because the truth of the matter is we have the fatal fantastic element within us,
Yeah.
right? And now that we have that awareness, right?
Hmm.
Again, it's so much, it's all about awareness.
Right.
Now,
Right.
now that we have the awareness, we have a chance to do something about it. Because you mentioned you feel like you have this innate innocence and purity, right? And I believe that is built into each one of us. That to a certain degree, that's the way we are designed. However, then there is this fatal fantastic element that constantly wants to disrupt, right? That constant, and to a certain degree, we know it's there, which is why sometimes accusations hurt so bad, because we know that we are a little bit guilty. My attitude was bad. I was late. I didn't respond in the way I should have, or whatever it is, right? But now that we know what we're looking for, and now that we know what the opposition is,
Hmm.
we have a chance of finding it. And then all of a sudden, when we talk about the soul, or when we talk about spiritual things, it's not ambiguous,
Hmm.
right? It's not all out there. It can be defined, and because I can define it, I can pursue it and have a chance of actually apprehending it.
And that's the biggest thing. I remember when I was probably about 12, my grandfather died, and there was like lots of chaos in the family as a result of that. And I went to my minister. I said, how do you pray? And he said, you just pray. I'm like, I'm 12. I
Mhm.
need instructions.
Right.
Please show me what I need to do. And, 30 something years later, Greg Brayton describes it. And I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense because I understand how to connect with the heart. I understand how to feel. I understand these things. Back then, I don't know if there was a language for it. I don't know if he knew how to answer it.
Mhm.
And and so like, I bring this up because when we have the different when we have greater awarenesses and we have the tools, we can actually implement them. I mean, it's
Mhm.
all free will choice, but like for me, one of my greatest passions in life is to liberate as much of my subconscious as I possibly can in terms of
Mhm.
programs and beliefs so I can be more of who I am.
Mhm.
And I have been blessed with amazing friends who actually show me my shadow aspects. So they regularly show me, hey, you got this thing here that like just want to show you that it's like distorting. Like I
Mhm.
love that because then I can see it and then I can love it into wholeness. That's just me. I love, well, let me rephrase it. I appreciate um being able to have friends like that so I can see those spots in me because I can't
Yeah.
see everything. And I have lots and lots of tools to help me integrate those. The tools are so important on the journey of self-discovery without like we're flailing around if we don't have them.
Yeah. Oh, and I think you just mentioned something that's so important, and that is friends that care about you enough to actually do that for you.
Mhm,
Because unfortunately, I think a lot of people have friends that affirm them to death,
mhm.
who aren't aren't good enough friends to say, "Hey, Sophia,
You have
there's
some
this
problems.
little that is it exactly, yeah, exactly. There's something hanging loose there, right? You might want to look into that, right?"
Yeah,
And how many people have ruined their lives, like at least in a temporary sense, right? Because they did not surround themselves with good friends like that.
right.
You know, all they did was surround themselves with, quote unquote, yes men, or people who were
Yeah,
just like validated every feeling. I mean, we need that.
yeah.
Oh man, we need validation. We need,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
suggesting that that's bad, but I'm just saying we also need that friend who will point out that dark spot, that fatal fantastic element and say,
Right.
right. And then that's the only way I can get strong. That's the only way I can improve and grow is if I let
Right,
people in my life like that.
right. And yeah,
But because of our craving for innocence, a lot of us weed those people out
yeah,
because we cannot,
true.
because even when we are guilty, we don't want to hear it.
Oh, I've been through the
Yeah.
process of like for me, my journey has been like learning how to respond to triggers.
Hmm.
And I've had people just like, and they have no idea what the trigger is. So like the initial was like, ow, that really hurt. Why did you hurt me? And then I realized you didn't even know I had that.
Yeah.
So how can I blame you for pressing something that I couldn't see that you didn't know was in me? Oh shoot, that's on me now.
Yeah.
So now I get to be present to that and feel it. And that's been like a 4-year journey of me like really being present to like when I feel the oh, I don't, it doesn't feel good. It's like, okay, where in my body can I feel it and then be
Yeah.
present to it? Um, thank the person
Hmm.
for pressing that button because I couldn't see it.
Yeah.
And then say, excuse me, I'm going to process this now instead of lashing out. Um, because I'm in a space where like I love my beingness very much. Ego's kind of a pain in the ass sometimes. So like when I feel that part of me like trying to protect me, it's like that's a behavior in me that is a protective mechanism that's trying to keep me safe and I see it and I love it. But if it's really hitting me in here, that's something for me to look at.
Yeah. Yeah. In my book, I talk about um, Mr. Despair and Little Miss Indignant. And they're flip sides. Mr. Despair says, Sophia, you are so guilty. You
Mm,
are so worthless. Why do you even try? Look at what you've done with your life. Constantly nattering in our ear. And
uh,
we need friends and people who will be like, kick Mr. Despair out of our lives.
yeah.
Right. But then
Yeah.
there's Little Miss Indignant. I never do anything wrong. Nothing's my fault. I'm the best person that ever walked the earth. Right.
Mhm.
Equally as poisonous, if not even more so, right?
Right.
And we need people in our lives that kick Little Miss Indignant out of our life, right? Because we oftentimes we need friends. We're designed to live in connection,
Right.
and we often don't have the strength.
Mhm.
And there's a Bible story talks about there's this battle that's raising, and as long as Moses is holding his hand, is the staff in the air, they're winning,
Mhm.
but then his arms get tired and they go down. So he has these two friends that run up to him and hold his hands up,
Mhm.
right? I
Yeah.
say that I just share that story to say we all need those people
Yeah.
to hold our hands up,
Oh
right?
yeah.
In those times when we're getting weak and tired, and sometimes again that's against Mr. Despair, sometimes against Little Miss Indignant.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I like because we need that balance. Otherwise, we don't have any. We're living in isolation, and we don't have a sense of who we are.
Yeah. Yep.
Because the echo chamber can get pretty.
I saw an interview. I can't remember. I'm not a person who follows celebrities at all, but I saw this interview of this lady, and I can't remember who it was, but she was talking about how she got divorced, and her husband was really fighting for the marriage, and she had walked away from the marriage, and it was years later, and she was grieving over that. And
Mhm.
she said in the interview, she said, if I had different friends, I
Mm,
think I would have stayed, and I think we would have sorted things out, and I think things would have been better.
mhm.
But she has to associate that with friends, because what she had was a bunch of Little Miss Indignants around her, right?
Right.
People that are like, "You go, girl. You're right. He's a jerk. You're right. Everything he does is wrong, right?" And looking back, she's like, "Oh, I wish I had that friend who had
Right.
said, 'Oh man, is there even a small part that you could work on?' Right?" But she didn't have that,
Right.
right? So we need those
And
friends.
also being open to that too, because
Yeah.
sometimes, I've had friends in my life where I've been that voice of, "Do you wanna look at that?" And they're not able to hear
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. You become they miss they unfairly assign you as someone assaulting their innocence,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
And you're doing what's healthy for them. And but that is where, like I said, our cravings become good or evil. Innocence craving, as an example, it was designed to propel us towards right relationship,
Mhm.
good standing with the
Mhm.
people around us, with our
Yeah.
maker, with society.
Mhm.
It was designed to propel us into that desire. But when we seek it in the wrong ways, right? I try to satisfy it through a victim mentality, through never being wrong, through incessive defensiveness and constantly blaming you for everything,
Mhm.
right? And that is a very unhealthy way to live. It's a cheap way to try to feel innocent, and it's a way that unfortunately doesn't last.
Yeah. I've met many people in my life like that, and
Yeah.
it's
Well, and I've been that guy. I mean, I can say, like, I know what it's like in my life. The reason I'm so passionate about this is because I know what it's like to um, be abused, and I know what it's like to be the person who has hurt the people around me.
Mhm.
And both of them are a deep pain,
Yeah.
right? And I know what it's like to be on all sides of
Mhm.
of this. I've been the hero and I've been the villain, right?
Mhm.
I've been the victim and I've been the perpetrator.
Mhm.
And um, well, I can look back and wish that had just always been good. I'm thankful now. Those experiences, I believe, have rounded me into a person who now sees myself accurately. Um, and that way I can hopefully help others see themselves as well.
Right. Yeah, one of my biggest gifts is a long, long history of codependency.
Mm,
Because I couldn't see it.
yeah.
And it's because I didn't feel like I could love myself enough. I needed to look outside of myself for that love. And once I started unwinding that after growing up with it and then having two long relationships with it, being single has been very helpful for me.
Mm,
Because I see the patterns of like why I was looking outside of myself, why I didn't think I was worthy of my own love. Um,
mhm,
into a space where I can be compassionate with myself. I can see the parts of me that are less by whatever standard pretty than other aspects,
yeah.
but they're still me.
Mhm,
I'm a mosaic of different things,
yeah.
and some are good and some are bad, but who's defining the bad, and why do I perceive it? Like, why do I have that judgment towards it if it's part of me?
Mm, mm,
And just loving it into wholeness. It doesn't mean that that's going to be something I like. I have, as an example, I have deep levels of anger that I've seen different levels of. It's still in
Hmm.
here. It's
Hmm.
not separate from me. It's still here. Do I judge it? Do I push it away? No, it's part of me.
Yeah.
So
Well,
understand
and
this.
anger is the negative side of passion,
Right.
and when I'm not sure completely what you mean by loving, like loving it into wholeness, but I think if I'm hearing you right, to a certain degree, that would kind of be, I would view it in that sense where, um, if that anger can be loved in a sense, to be turned and eventually morphed into passion, right?
Mhm.
Then that's a good and beautiful thing,
Yeah.
right?
And
Yep.
first is the acceptance of having it, right?
Right. Yep.
And then allowing it to feel safe.
Hmm.
And then as it feels more safe, then it can stop holding on to that flip side of the passion and and just release that shadow aspect of it more and more, which is ultimately what happens whenever I find something in me that is an emotion that hasn't been expressed. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, where is this? How am I feeling into it? What does it really need?
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean by loving it into
Hmm.
wholeness, is because it's just, you know, we have all these different the aspects,
Yeah.
light and dark, and they're all
Yeah.
us. And do I want
Yeah.
anger? Well, no, unless I feel like I need to defend something that's innocent, but
Right.
then it's more righteous than anger.
Right.
Um,
Well, and that's the thing about the cravings. At times they're like distinct and it's obvious. At other times they're all blended together and it's like, is this significance or is this innocence or what is this, right?
right.
And I appreciate your story because I can tell you that in the phrase codependent, or the word codependent, I think it's kind of tricky nowadays because there's been so many different definitions towards it. The way that I have struggled and I believe overcome in my own life with it is, um, in one sense or definition of the phrase, independence or codependence is when I I struggle with identity, in the sense that I have the idea, if there is no me, if there is no we, right?
Hmm.
Like my whole identity is wrapped up in you, right?
Yeah.
Like that's something that I've struggled with from my own childhood wounds,
Hmm.
right? And I've really had to battle and say and find that personal identity,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? That is, and that, to be honest, I think ultimately that's what makes a relationship really strong.
Hmm.
Is not when you no longer have individual identities, but when you are individual identities intentionally entwined
Right.
together, right? Codependency is bad, um, but um, that doesn't mean dependency is bad, right?
Right.
As
Right.
long as it's a healthy dependency,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
So
because like that state of like losing self to make somebody else happy, that's the
yeah,
unhealthy aspect.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And it's a soul craving. You can't, it can't be sustained for long
Right.
in that type of sense, right? And
Right.
ultimately, like I mentioned, these are non-biological cravings. So at the end of the day, they have to be satisfied in non-biological things,
Mhm.
right? In my own personal view, I believe that we were designed to live in connection with our maker.
Mhm.
And I'm a person of faith, so I have my personal beliefs, but I don't try to force them on people at this stage. I
Mhm.
just want people to know you were designed to live in connection with that which is much greater than yourself, right? And if you're not living in connection with that, if your life is saying, okay, I'm going to find my security, my identity, you know, my independence, significance, innocence, in all the here's where the world looks constantly. We're so unimaginative. Money for thousands of years.
Mhm.
And you know what invariably happens, right? In my own small way, I remember making $12 an hour.
Mhm.
And I remember clearly thinking, oh, if I could just make 15, I could be happy. And then you make 15. Oh, if I could just have 20, I
Mhm.
could be happy. And you
Yep.
make 20, and it just keeps growing. It
Yep.
will not satisfy. Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, says not many people would want to be me. Right?
Right.
So we look for it in wealth. We look for it in fame. Oh
Mhm.
man. If you look at the lives of stars out there, I'm sure of course there are benefits to it,
Yeah.
but oh, the hurt that comes along with that. We think, if I just had control, if I just had the power over the situation, if I was the one in charge, I could be happy. But It's never enough. That's the whole, here's the problem. Here's what we do. I get control and I realize, oh shoot, I thought that would make me happy. You know what? I think I need more control.
Right.
Like, that's what we do. I'll get a
Right.
little bit more control.
Mhm.
That'll make me happy. We get it. It's like, oh shoot, what do I need? Where did I go wrong? I need more control, right? We just keep going back to these same places: more money, more fame, more control, more sex, more education, whatever it is, and it's never enough because we're looking in all the wrong places.
Right. Right.
What we need to do is get out in nature. What
Mhm.
we need to do is have that moment where we realize there is something bigger than me, and
Mhm.
my life is more than my bank account. It's more than the number on the weigh scale or the diploma on my wall. It is bigger, it is more beautiful. And when we have that awakening and that realization, it changes the way we live. It changes who we are. It gives us access to true joy, not just entertainment.
Mhm. Yeah, I found, I'll give an example. Last night, I'm living in a house with two other beautiful souls, and they put on Blazing Saddles, and just the innocent, goofy
Yep.
humor of that was great. After that, they put on two other movies, and I was like, "Yeah, I just can't." And I went upstairs and I was just quiet for the rest of the night because my soul was like, okay, one was good, not three.
Mhm.
Two feels like too much effort, and
Yeah.
then I'm not in myself. I lose myself in the entertainment, and that doesn't feel good
Yeah.
anymore. And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with it. It's just like for me, it's like, oh, this is too much.
Yeah.
Like, how do like because I could just feel myself disconnecting from me.
Yeah.
And so bringing that awareness in, I mean, it's a process for sure. Um, I know my coping mechanism as a kid was distraction. So I became a master at distraction. I'm really good at distraction. So if I catch myself distracting myself, and I need to for like 20 minutes, I'll let myself distract myself. And then I'm like, okay, you're done.
Mhm.
What's the feeling you want to feel right now? Be present to that because it just doesn't feel good anymore.
But that is you. That's you
Yep.
understanding that when you feel those feelings, it's like it's the I'll use the word spiritual. I'm not sure that's the right way. It's the spiritual equivalent to hunger pains. Your
Mm,
soul is telling you it needs nourishment,
mhm,
right?
mhm.
And you are in tune enough to sense that
Yeah.
and to then say, okay, it needs a meal. And
Mm,
that meal has something to do with security, identity, independence, significance,
right,
in a sense, right?
right.
Um, think about it in a biological sense, right? We have this amazing craving known as thirst.
Mhm,
We get thirsty and we
mhm,
have to go drink water.
mhm.
Imagine if we didn't have a craving for thirst. We would forget to drink water and we'd
Right,
be dead in 4 days,
right,
right?
right.
So what the thirst does is it actually propels us towards, partaking of that which gives us life. Hunger pains are the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Whereas I say to people, when you feel that anxiety or that fear or that bitterness or that anger or whatever it is, it's your soul. It's a spiritual hunger pain. Your soul is telling you it needs nourishment, and you have to figure out how to feed it. It's
Yeah.
not just a psychological thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to diminish this, psychological or the biological. We are three-part beings, and while we are here on Earth, we are they're interconnected. You can't harm one without harming the other,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
But I just say this because we as a culture seem to a certain degree, worship at the altar of the psychological. And we are so much more, and we
Mhm.
are so much deeper. And as long as we're just digging around, prefrontal cortexes and dopamine and serotonin, we won't find the answer to why.
Right.
Yeah.
And, the why is bringing in those levels of peace and joy
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
beingness
Yeah.
and
Well,
having,
and not only that, but think of peace as an example. Remember, I said I wanted to define things.
yeah.
Peace is not something that we can define for ourselves. I'll tell you what requires peace: security, identity, independence, significance, innocence. And here's the thing: with peace, all five of them have to be satisfied simultaneously.
Mhm. That makes
And
sense.
that's why moments we seem to just have moments of peace. Peace
Mhm.
seems so fleeting. Like we
Right.
experience it for an afternoon, or even maybe on a vacation or something like that. We experience it for 2 whole weeks, right? and then it's gone. Because it requires that all five are satisfied simultaneously, right?
Mhm.
I can feel safe in my home, very secure, safe in my relationships. I can know who I am, right? I can feel a strong, healthy um, independence. But if someone is making me feel small and insignificant, I'm not at peace,
Right.
right? Or I can feel innocent and righteous and good about myself. I can feel like I am special. I can feel like I walk in freedom. But if I feel like someone's breaking into my home, I don't have peace.
Mhm.
They all have to be satisfied simultaneously,
Yeah.
right? And here's the trick, as Elon Musk told us, essentially, without meaning to tell us, right? There is nothing on earth that can satisfy these cravings simultaneously for any length of time.
Mhm.
And so we have to look for something bigger.
Mhm.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, I'm a person of faith, but my goal isn't to try to tell people what that is. What I say to you is, now that you know what you're looking for, you have a chance of finding it. Go look. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Because faith is truly an individual journey,
Yeah.
and to bring to bring the spirit into the awareness of our wholeness and understanding how to connect with it, to have that balance is so paramount to
Yeah.
fully experiencing life.
Yeah. Yep. And that's why, again, you see this happening all the time in stardom,
Mhm.
right? There's someone gets famous.
Mhm.
Suddenly they have all the money they never knew they could have, all the all the fame, all the sex, all the opportunity, and it doesn't bring them peace. And
Mhm.
so oftentimes what happens is they get political. All of a sudden the movie star is trying to tell us how to vote, right? And they think that'll bring them happy. It doesn't bring them happiness. And then ultimately they turn to some form of spirituality,
Right.
very often, or like so many of us, we just turn to either entertainment or to different types of substances to dull the pain
Right.
of not finding that peace that
Yeah.
we were designed to find.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like masking anything, so
Yeah. Yeah. And you're great at not doing it. Speaking of energy, I love the energy you have. I love the honesty that you have, about sharing those dark parts within you, right?
good.
And having friends around you who will both affirm the light,
Yeah.
and bring attention to the dark, right?
I
Not
am.
for the purpose of condemnation and walking
No,
away, but for
no,
the purpose of growth and
right.
health and all those things we need. Yeah.
I have spent a lot of time cultivating that.
Yep. Yeah.
'Cause I've had people just like denigrate me, and it's like, well, that doesn't feel right. That doesn't feel good. Like, is that
Yeah.
constructive for my soul? No,
Yeah.
that's you should it's you're projecting your stuff onto me,
Yeah.
and that just doesn't feel good for either one of us. But like if you genuinely see something in me that doesn't look like it's the soul essence of me, please let me know.
Right.
I'll probably cry a little if it hurts, and thank
I
you.
might not talk for you for the weekend.
No, it's usually like 10, 15 minutes. It's not that bad.
Yes.
But like, it's like, okay, thank you. That really hurts
Hmm.
inside. You didn't do anything. So let me just excuse myself, process, and then I'll be back when I'm done.
Hmm.
And that it's just become a way of being for me because I don't like repressing feelings anymore. I
Yeah.
don't like not feeling.
Right.
So
And then it's that fine line between, like, that's a good person who will come alongside us and help us with those awarenesses. But then there's the fine line to cross over to a bad person who is someone who will just point out your flaws in a fraudulent effort to make themselves feel more righteous,
yeah, I grew up
right?
in Monroe County, Connecticut. I used to know that so well.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how can I put you down to make myself feel better? None of that feels good.
Yeah.
None of that feels good.
Yeah.
So, but happily, I don't have any of that anymore.
Hmm.
That's called discernment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Corey, wow. This is just, I am so enjoying your beingness, and I
Mhm.
thank you so much.
Well, it's just been a delight being here with you today. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and I want to ask you one more question or two more
Sure.
questions. First,
Sure.
how can people find you and where can they find your book?
Sure. Um, the simplest way to find me is just visiting my website, CoryRosenske.com. You can learn more about me. You can even contact me through the website. And there's some links to the book from there. The book is available worldwide, kind of everywhere. So if you just type The Magnetic Heart of God, or Cory Rosenske, into whatever Google search engine or whatever search engine you use, it'll show up at a store near you.
Awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you, my brother, for your light, for your beingness, for all the work you've done in the world. And I look forward to seeing how you continue to expand what you're doing.
Thank you, Sophia. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing your time and your platform.
You are so very welcome.